On March 19th, 2016, it was a Saturday morning in Clydebank, a close-knit town along the northern banks of the River Clyde in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. It was the kind of place where weekends followed familiar patterns, where people recognized one another, and mornings usually passed quietly. Just before 8:15 a.m., 15-year-old Paige Doherty was already out and walking. She'd spent the night at a friend's house in the Whitecrook area and was heading toward a bus stop, following a route she knew well. Like many weekends before, she was on her way to her part-time job at a hairdressing salon in Kirkintilloch, about 12 miles away. To the people who knew her, Paige was warm and easy to like, kind, bright, and full of plans for the future. That morning, she was wearing a dark jacket, jeans, and white Nike trainers. Nothing about her stood out. She was just another teenager on her way to work, moving through a routine she'd done countless times before. At around 8:21 a.m., CCTV cameras caught Paige walking toward a local shop on Fleming Avenue, the Delicious Deli. Her pace was relaxed, her movements unremarkable. She went inside, likely intending to grab a quick breakfast roll, exchange a few words with the shopkeeper, and then continue on to catch her bus. She never made it back outside. For the rest of the neighborhood, the morning unfolded as usual. People went about their day, unaware that something deeply wrong had already happened. Inside the back room of the shop, events were unfolding that no one outside could see. CCTV footage, later shown in court, would reveal that within 10 minutes of Paige entering the deli, the shutters were pulled down, a detail that would later take on disturbing significance. As the hours passed, concern began to grow. Paige didn't arrive at work. She didn't message anyone. There were no phone calls, no sign that she'd boarded a bus. By the afternoon, her family and friends were searching for answers. Her mother, Pamela Munro, contacted people Paige knew and learned that she had never shown up at the salon. By evening, the worry had turned into panic. Paige was officially reported missing, and police launched a search. News spread quickly through Clydebank, and the town that had woken up to an ordinary Saturday was now facing the possibility that one of its own had vanished without a trace. By that afternoon, the mood in town had shifted. Clydebank, usually busy with weekend shoppers, felt tense and unsettled. Posters with Paige's smiling face were taped to lampposts and shop windows. Her photo began circulating online, shared again and again by people hoping it might reach the right person. A teenager on her way to work had disappeared, and no one could explain how or why. As Saturday turned into Sunday, the waiting became harder. Family and friends walked the route Paige was expected to take, along Fleming Avenue, past shops she knew, toward bus stops she'd used many times before. They checked and rechecked their phones, hoping for a reply that never came. Paige didn't show up for her shift at the hair salon in Kirkintilloch. She didn't answer messages. She didn't call. By then, people in Clydebank knew something wasn't right. More posters went up. Her face appeared everywhere, on street corners, in shop windows, across social media feeds. A Facebook page set up to help find her spread quickly, shared by neighbors, classmates, and complete strangers. Everyone was looking for something: a sighting, a detail, anything that might help explain where Paige had gone. By Sunday evening, with still no word from her, Paige's mother, Pamela Munro, made the decision every parent dreads. She contacted police and officially reported her daughter missing. What had started as worry was now full-blown fear, the growing sense that this was more than a missed bus or a dead phone battery. The following day, Monday, March 21st, the search took a devastating turn. In a wooded area beside Great Western Road, a busy stretch not far from the center of Clydebank, a local walker noticed something in the undergrowth. At first, it looked like rubbish that had been dumped, but as they moved closer, it became clear it was something far worse. A body had been found. Police Scotland soon confirmed the news. The body was identified as Paige Doherty. Detective Superintendent Duncan Sloan, who was leading the major investigation team, spoke to the media near the scene. His message was direct and serious. What the community had feared was now confirmed. Paige's disappearance was no longer a search for a missing girl. It was a murder investigation. He spoke plainly about what officers had found and appealed directly to the public for help. Anyone who knew Paige or who had seen her on Saturday morning was urged to come forward. Police, he said, were keeping an open mind about what had happened, a reflection of how many unanswered questions still remained about the hours between Paige leaving her friend's house and her body being found 2 days later. As forensic officers spent long days working at the scene, photographing, collecting evidence, and carefully mapping the area, the town responded with an outpouring of grief. The Titan crane, a familiar landmark in Clydebank, was lit pink in Paige's memory. Friends and neighbors organized vigils and gatherings. Hundreds of people came together in White Crook Park to remember a teenager whose life had barely begun. Online, tributes spread just as quickly. People shared photos and messages using the hashtag #PoutForPaige, a nod to her playful smile and the personality so many remembered. It was a way for people to show support, even when they didn't have the words. Detective Superintendent Duncan Sloan later spoke about the impact the case had on officers themselves. Investigators began the painstaking task of reviewing hours of CCTV footage from around Fleming Avenue. Central to that effort was the last confirmed sighting of Paige, captured at 8:21 a.m. as she entered the Delicious Deli. Every frame was examined, slowed down, replayed, and checked again as police worked to understand where she went next and what happened inside that narrow window of time. What had started as a search for a missing teenager had now become something far more serious. This was no longer just about one family's loss. It was about a town coming to terms with the fact that someone they knew, someone they had watched grow up, had been taken in a way that made no sense. As Clydebank struggled to process the discovery of Paige's body in a wooded embankment off Great Western Road, Police Scotland launched a full murder investigation. Detectives from the major investigation team moved quickly, combining forensic analysis with extensive CCTV review to trace Paige's final movements. From the outset, Duncan Sloan made one thing clear: every possible motive would be explored. Nothing was being ruled out. The first task for investigators was to work out, step by step, what had happened. They needed to trace how a 15-year-old girl could leave a friend's house that morning and never make it to work. Teams began reviewing hours of CCTV footage from nearby shops, street cameras, and passing vehicles. It was slow, detailed work, with officers watching the same moments again and again. One detail quickly stood out. At 8:21 a.m. on Saturday morning, cameras showed Paige walking into the Delicious Deli on Fleming Avenue. She went in casually, as anyone would. But there was no footage of her coming back out. Within minutes of her entering the shop, investigators began to notice things that didn't fit with a normal customer visit. The shutters were pulled down. Food orders were left unfinished. Shortly afterward, CCTV showed the shop owner, John Leatham, leaving the deli to buy supplies. Bin bags, antibacterial wipes, and bleach. More footage followed. Leatham was seen carrying something from the shop that was later identified as Paige's body, wrapped in what appeared to be black bin liners. He placed it in the boot of his car. For the officers reviewing the footage, the reality of what they were seeing was devastating. The CCTV became central to the case. As Detective Superintendent Duncan Sloan later explained, it showed one clear fact: Paige walked into that shop, and she never walked out. When that footage was combined with forensic evidence from the deli and from the location where her body was later found, the direction of the investigation became unmistakable. What police uncovered was a sequence of events that was difficult to comprehend. CCTV showed Leatham removing Paige's body from the shop less than 10 minutes after she entered. After that, he returned to work, serving customers and preparing food as if nothing had happened. In the days that followed, cameras also captured him on a family outing, while Paige's body remained hidden in a shed at his home. Those ordinary moments, set alongside what investigators now knew, only underlined the seriousness of the crime. When detectives eventually confronted Leatham, he was arrested and charged. The case sent shock through Clydebank and far beyond it. At the High Court in Glasgow, John Leatham pleaded guilty to the murder of Paige Doherty. He admitted that the attack took place in the back office of the deli, following a brief conversation about a job, a moment that ended Paige's life and left a community searching for answers. In his account to the court, Leatham claimed that Paige had threatened to accuse him of touching her if she wasn't given work at the shop. The judge later made it clear that this claim had no evidence to support it. As the trial continued, the scale of the violence became impossible to ignore. A post-mortem examination showed that Paige had been stabbed at least 61 times, mainly to her head and neck. She had also suffered a further 85 cuts as she tried to defend herself. Many of these were identified as defensive wounds, clear signs that she fought back. The number and nature of the injuries spoke to the intensity of the attack and the force used against her. With each detail laid out in court, the emotional weight of the case grew heavier. Detectives, forensic specialists, neighbors, and friends were faced with the same reality. This was not a sudden or random act. It was a violent betrayal that ended a young life in moments. Paige's mother, Pamela Munro, later spoke about the lasting impact of that knowledge, describing nightmares in which she could hear her daughter screaming and the struggle to live with what Paige must have endured in her final moments. What ultimately mattered was the evidence. Police work, careful, detailed, and methodical, ensured that the truth was documented and could not be explained away. Frame by frame, trace by trace, investigators built a clear picture of what happened that Saturday morning. The trial of John Leatham at the High Court in Glasgow brought the full reality of the case into public view. By that point, the evidence was overwhelming. CCTV footage, forensic findings, and witness statements all pointed to the same conclusion. Paige Doherty was killed in the back room of Leatham's shop during a sudden and violent attack. In court, sketches and footage showed Leatham sitting quietly as prosecutors walked through the events of March 19, 2016. Paige had entered the shop to buy food before heading to work. Within minutes, her life was over. Her body was later found in a wooded embankment near Great Western Road. The injuries documented in the post-mortem, more than 60 stab wounds and dozens of defensive cuts, told the story of a desperate struggle that should never have happened. During the trial, the court heard from police officers, forensic specialists, and people from the local area. Each account added to the same painful conclusion. Paige had walked into a place where she should have been safe, and she never walked back out. Prosecutors described the attack as brutal and unprovoked, language that reflected the evidence laid out and left the courtroom silent as the scale of what had happened became clear. The defense tried to explain Leatham's actions by pointing to a brief disagreement about a possible job. He claimed Paige had threatened to accuse him of inappropriate behavior if he didn't offer her work. The judge rejected that claim outright, stating there was no evidence to support it and that nothing could explain or excuse the level of violence used. The court also examined what happened afterward. Evidence showed Leatham returning to the shop and carrying on as normal. There was footage of cleaning supplies being bought, bin liners being used, and steps taken to hide Paige's body. The calm, deliberate nature of those actions stood in sharp contrast to the violence that had just taken place and weighed heavily on the proceedings. When sentencing day arrived, Judge Lord Matthews addressed the seriousness of the crime directly. He described the killing as truly reprehensible, emphasizing that Paige was a young teenager, entirely vulnerable, and that Leatham was an adult who had been trusted within the community. He handed down a life sentence, with a minimum of 27 years to be served before any possibility of release. Outside the courtroom, the impact on Clydebank was plain to see. Paige's family, friends, and neighbors struggled to take in what had happened. Many spoke of shock and anger, trying to understand how someone known in the community could carry out such violence against a child. Vigils and memorials followed, each one reflecting the depth of loss felt far beyond Paige's immediate family. Years on, the case still resonates. It stands as a reminder of how quickly lives can be changed, and how the consequences of violence stretch far beyond the moment it happens. For Paige's mother, Pamela Munro, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but it did not bring peace. The grief remained, as did the reality of a life taken far too soon. In interviews after the sentencing, Pamela Munro spoke about what it meant to live without her daughter. She talked about the silence Paige left behind, and the effort it took to get through each day. Over time, she found a way to turn that pain into something purposeful. She founded Paige's Promise, an initiative focused on supporting young people and helping communities talk more openly about safety, awareness, and how to look out for one another. The court case was over. A sentence had been handed down. But for Paige's family, her friends, and the town of Clydebank, nothing about it felt finished. A life had been taken in minutes on a March morning, and the space it left behind wasn't something time could simply erase. For Pamela, the days that followed were shaped by absence. Every room in the house held reminders of Paige. The routines she should have been growing into, the plans she never got the chance to make. That loss never went away, but it became the reason Pamela pushed forward, determined that Paige would be remembered for more than the way she died. The wider community felt the impact too. Clydebank changed. People spoke about how everyday routines suddenly felt different. Trips to the shops, walks to the bus stop, quick errands, things that had once felt automatic, now carried a sense of caution. Parents kept a closer eye on their children. Neighbors became more watchful. The town was grieving and trying to protect itself at the same time. Vigils and memorials became places for people to come together. Flowers and candles appeared near Fleming Avenue and other spots connected to Paige's final movements. Charity events followed, offering another way to remember her. At the center of it all was Paige's Promise, a project built to teach personal safety, encourage awareness, and support families dealing with loss. It stood as both a tribute and a practical response to what had happened. Even years later, the questions haven't completely gone away. How could something like this happen in a place where people felt they knew and trusted one another? Were there signs that went unnoticed or moments that might have changed the outcome? Those questions remain part of Paige's story and part of the legacy she left behind. Detective Superintendent Duncan Sloan later reflected that while the investigation uncovered exactly what had happened, it also exposed a difficult reality for police. Threats don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they exist in everyday places, hidden in plain sight, where no one expects danger. Paige's story became a painful reminder of that, not just for Clydebank, but for families and communities far beyond it. It showed how quickly trust can be broken, even in familiar settings. At the same time, it revealed something else, how people come together in the aftermath. Neighbors looking out for one another. Communities finding ways to support those left behind. In Clydebank, Paige's name didn't fade. It lived on through vigils, charities, school discussions, and in the memories of those who knew her. What followed wasn't only about grief. It was about learning how to carry it. The town had to find a way to mourn while still protecting its young people. Paige's family had to search for meaning in a loss that never should have happened. Her life ended suddenly, but the impact of her story didn't end there. Paige Doherty was 15 years old. She was a teenager with plans, friendships, and a future still taking shape. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. On a Saturday morning in March 2016, she set out on a short errand and never came home. In the days and months that followed, Clydebank mourned. Her family lived with a grief that words can't fully explain. Across Scotland, people tried to understand how such violence could take place in a setting that felt safe and familiar. The investigation laid out the facts through CCTV footage, forensic evidence, and courtroom testimony. The truth was clear, but it offered no comfort. Out of that loss, something lasting emerged. Paige's mother, Pamela Munro, chose to turn her grief into action. She founded Paige's Promise, an initiative focused on education, awareness, and keeping young people safe. It became a way to honor Paige not only for how she died, but for who she was. Paige's story is a reminder to pay attention, to look out for one another, and to never take safety for granted, even in places that feel familiar. Her life was far too short, but the meaning carried forward in her name continues to reach others. Paige Doherty is remembered, and her story still matters. Thank you for watching Murder Ledger. We explore real cases, unanswered questions, and the details that refuse to fade. If these stories matter to you, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments.